All right, and welcome back to Saki Sizwe. My name is Lida Martin.
And my name is Emmanuel Morio.
Today we're going to have our weekly episode of the Advice Office on Bush Radio. Today's critical discussion is about domestic violence in South Africa. I'm joined by representatives from 4 leading organizations that provide essential support and legal services to victims of domestic violence. These are the Women's Legal Center, MOSAIC, local advice offices, and probono.org. Domestic violence remains one of South Africa's most pressing social issues, affecting thousands of people across all communities, ages, and backgrounds. Today, we'll explore what constitutes domestic violence under South African law, identify warning signs, discuss available solutions, and understand how both victims and bystanders can take action. Our guests work on the front lines of this issue, providing legal advice, support services, and advocacy for those who need it most. Their insights will help us understand not just the legal framework, but the practical steps we can all take to address domestic violence in our communities. So, under South African law, specifically the Domestic Violence Act, what exactly constitutes domestic violence? Can you break down the different types of violence recognized by our legal system beyond just physical abuse?
The Domestic Violence Act has quite a broad spectrum of the types of violence that a complainant can apply for protection order for. Some of the violence includes physical and sexual abuse, emotional, verbal, psychological violence, economic abuse, intimidation, coercive or controlling behavior, harassment or sexual harassment. The new amendments have included acts like spiritual abuse, as well as exposing a child to domestic violence. Other abuse also includes elder abuse, as well as related person abuse. So we can see from the Domestic Violence Act and the amendments that it is quite broad in the types of violence that the Domestic Violence Act specifically covers.
So, Chelsea, who can be a victim of domestic violence according to South African law? Are we talking about only intimate partners, or does this definition extend to other family relationships, say an uncle or a grandfather?
So according to the South African law, victims aren't just limited to romantic partners or within romantic relationships, but there's a wide range of domestic relationships that can include parents and children, relatives, siblings, people who are living together, even as housemates or extended family, individuals who share parental responsibility for a child, as well as same-sex couples and LGBTQIA individuals, and of course your married and dating couples. There's a wide range. It's not just limited to those who are married or in a relationship, but family relationships as well.
Thank you, Chelsea. I heard that you mentioned different types of violence. Could you maybe walk us through the various forms like physical, emotional, psychological, economic, and sexual abuse? What do these look like in real life situation, and what psychological impact does it have on a victim?
Andrea, would you like to answer that question?
Sure. Well, it obviously does depend on the type of relationship that you or the complainant. So when I speak about the complainant, it is the person who is being abused or experiencing violence. And then a respondent in the legal term is the abuser, right? So physical and sexual abuse is quite self-explanatory. Sexual abuse includes rape or sexual assault. Economic, verbal, psychological abuse includes verbal abuse like insults, emotional abuse, economic abuse, perhaps taking someone's finances or controlling finances, intimidation, controlling behavior, dictating what someone can wear or can't wear, harassment or sexual harassment. And then elder abuse or elder persons, neglect is one of the ways in which elder abuse can occur. And then just generally exposing a child to domestic violence where, for example, the child grows up actually witnessing violence where one parent or partner abuses another. So those are some of the situations and real life situations in which violence occurs.
Thank you for the enlightening.
Masi?
Good
Amazing.
afternoon
Good
to
afternoon,
you
Masi.
and your listeners.
I wanted to ask you, what would you say are the key red flags that someone might be in an abusive relationship? How can people recognize these warning signs in themselves or in others before the situation escalates and gets more dangerous?
Because the definition of abuse is broad, abuse can manifest itself in many different ways, and therefore those so-called red flags can come across in very different ways. I also think that sometimes in our society, what should be red flags have been normalized as part of society, and that's part of the problem. So, for example, a red flag could be when someone is constantly trying to flirt with you without you being interested, and you make your position known that you are not interested to engage in a romantic or sexual relationship with this person, but they consistently are pursuing you. So in those circumstances, that is abusive. In those circumstances, that's harassment. But unfortunately, we live in a society that doesn't recognize that. Another thing that I would say, that if you are in a romantic relationship or in a marriage and you're being isolated from your family and friends, sometimes you find parents encouraging that, saying that your marriage is the most important thing that you need to foster, and therefore you should be distant from your family and friends. But if you have a partner that is trying to control you and is coercive to the point where even though you want to be in contact with family and friends, you're being stopped from making contact, that's a red flag. So again, depending on whether there's economic abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, there's various red flags. And I think the most important thing to look out for, and maybe this is not maybe the most legal way to put it, is just follow your gut feeling and speak to those that you trust, who can also help you understand that you're in a situation that's abusive and that you need to speak out about it.
Thank you. I really agree with this idea of trusting your gut feeling, and if you're being sort of pushed away from your support system, then that is something that is dangerous and you need to keep a lookout for. So, Chelsea, what practical steps can someone take to protect themselves if they're experiencing domestic violence? Like, what immediate safety measures should they consider?
I think for most survivors or victims of domestic violence, many of them try and reason with their feelings of being unsafe. But I think what's important is that in any moment of identifying that you do feel unsafe, I think just as Masi shared, the gut feeling that you have, if you are feeling unsafe in your home or in your relationship, I think first thing is to know that you're not alone, and that there are steps that you can take to protect self, even if there are small steps. So as social workers, one thing that we do discuss with those who are in danger is thinking about and creating a safety plan. So thinking ahead what you could do if you have to leave quickly. And some of it could be like identifying safety exits in your home or your building, keeping important documents like your ID, your children's birth certificates, any protection order, clinic cards in a safe place so that even should something happen, that's what you can leave with, or keeping them at a trusted friend's house. But I think to make this safety plan effective, it's firstly identifying someone that you can trust, whether it be a friend, it can even be a neighbor, but identifying someone that you can trust, or even just letting one person know about your situation so that you feel less isolated, and discussing that should you call at this time or should you leave this amount of missed calls, that's an indicator that you're in need of safety or help in that moment. I think what's also amazing is that there are so many platforms available to reach out in cases of feeling unsafe, which is one of them, the National Shelter Movement, which I think is quite a perfect platform because it even allows an emergency exit should you not want anyone to see that you are on the website, as well as the GBV helpline that can easily be accessed through the internet. And I think another important practical step that can be taken in light of moments of tension is just avoiding confrontation. So if things are escalating, to keep yourself safe by avoiding arguments, especially if you feel like this person may become violent with you, because of course your safety comes first. But if possible, trying to stay in a room with an exit and avoid places where there are things that can be used to harm you, like the kitchen or the garage or a bathroom where there are no escape or there are weapons. And I think what's also important is reaching out early. Of course, if one is scared and unsure, there are people that can support, but one doesn't have to wait until it becomes very bad, which I support, which is what Masi shared, not waiting until the last moment, but actually trusting your gut. But of course, that's not very easy, but there are these various services that's available to help and support you in that. And I think one of them, of course, MOSAIC, which doesn't only help with the containment of the trauma that you're going through, but taking you through safety planning, taking the necessary steps should you need court support or referrals for shelter or legal help.
So much much, Chelsea. All right, welcome back to Saki Sizwe, Building Nasi, Building the Nation. This is Bush Radio's Advice Office. We're talking about domestic violence in South Africa. Again, I'm joined by representatives from many leading organizations that are providing essential support and legal services to victims of domestic violence. The Women's Legal Center, MOSAIC, local advice offices, and probono.org. Lastly, we were talking with Chelsea Manuel about what practical steps someone can take to protect themselves if they're experiencing domestic violence. Next up, I want to ask Andrea, what legal options are available to victims in South Africa? What other legal remedies exist for victims of domestic violence?
The most obvious one is the Domestic Violence Protection Order, where the violence has a criminal offense to it. You can also go and report it and lay a charge, for example, of assault or sexual violence like rape. But for the Domestic Violence Act specifically, you can go to your nearest magistrate's court within the jurisdiction. And when we speak about jurisdiction, we mean where the complainant or the respondent resides, carries on business or studies, or where the act of domestic violence occurred. And so you can go to the clerk of the magistrate's court and apply for a protection order. For this, you would need supporting documents such as your identification document, an affidavit that really sets out the nature and the extent and the history of the domestic violence, as well as any evidence, for example, photographs, witness statements, medical reports that you do have. I can just walk you through the process quickly. Once you have applied and filled in the form and have submitted all the supporting documents, a magistrate will then review the application and then on the day either issue an interim protection order, which I can speak to, alternatively issue a notice to show cause. The interim protection order is usually granted, and it is a court order in the interim before the final date or the return date where you and the respondent will be in front of a magistrate and really set out your case as to why a final protection order should be granted. And so the court really issues the interim protection order if it is satisfied and if the magistrate is satisfied that there is what we call prima facie evidence. So on the face of it, has the respondent committed a domestic violence act, or is there a chance that, when I say the complainant, the person that is applying for the protection order is suffering or may suffer harm as a result of the domestic violence, and that really immediate relief is sought for the harm, and that issuing the protection order is necessary in that regard. Just a note that when a court does issue a notice to show cause, this is not a protection order or interim protection order. It's only a notice telling the complainant and respondent to come back on the return date and then present their case to the magistrate. So that's the initial protection order application process that usually happens on the day where you'll get the interim protection order or the notice to show cause.
Thank you, Andrea. But for the protection order, can someone else maybe applied for the victim? Like if I know that my neighbor is experiencing violence, can I apply for her to protect her from the person who is violented her? Is it possible to do it like that?
It is. The Domestic Violence Act does make provision for another person to apply on behalf of an abused person, and it has certain requirements though. If a complainant cannot apply for themselves, then usually written consent of the complainant must be given to the person who is applying on their behalf. There are certain circumstances where this is not necessary, especially when the complainant is, for example, a child. And so the court will consider the application and look at what is in the best interest of the child. Alternatively, where a complainant is unable to provide written consent, then the requirement for written consent is not required. There are also mandatory reporting, and the Domestic Violence Act speaks to mandatory reporting by a functionary. And usually these functionaries would be a social worker like Chelsea, a healthcare professional or an educator, or alternatively, a concerned person that is interested in the abused person's well-being. And usually those are only where you are dealing with a child, a minor, or a person with disabilities and what we call vulnerable groups. I think it's also important to know that mandatory reporting does make it compulsory for functionaries and specific people to report domestic violence. And those people designated by the minister must report such knowledge, belief, or suspicion as soon as possible to the police or social worker. So yeah, a long way to say that you can't have someone else apply on your behalf. However, there are requirements for that to happen.
Masi, I have a question related to what we just spoke about with mandatory reporters. Do you know who are mandatory reporters, and are they required to disclose that they are a mandatory reporter before sort of reporting any kind of domestic violence? How does that work?
So this is not necessarily something that I'm too au fait with, so I would request that Chelsea and AJ assist me here. But to my understanding, for example, if you are a medical practitioner and you notice that your patient might have faced issues when it comes to gender-based violence or any domestic violence, then you can discuss with that particular patient in order to determine whether they're comfortable with the issue to be escalated. I know it's with children as well, especially when it comes to teachers, as well as with, let's say, parents, well, where they notice that there could be any abuse in the household. That's also something that can be further reported. But again, I don't necessarily have too intimate knowledge in relation to that. So I think I would pass it over to one of the other.
Do you have anything that you would like to add to this?
I think Masi covered it quite well. I think there's always a fine line between someone wanting to access the services of support versus not wanting to. But I think what's important is, of course, just helping them feel that they are supported and that there are steps that can be taken to still protect their dignity and who they are as individuals.
Yeah, maybe just to piggyback of what Chelsea had said around the mandatory reporting, just to clarify that mandatory reporting is only in circumstances where it's a child, an older person, or a person with disabilities. Like Chelsea and Masi had said, you can't force anyone to go and report violence, right? You can support them through the process, but there are certain vulnerable groups where mandatory reporting is required by the Domestic Violence Act and by certain individuals that the minister may designate.
We're also joined by the Hedeveld Advice Office, and we'd love to ask the Advice Office, what should bystanders do when they suspect someone is experiencing domestic violence, and how can friends, family, and community members provide effective support without putting anyone at greater risk?
Good day from Hedeveld Advice Office. Yes, bystanders can actually report cases of domestic violence. They can come to our office actually, where we assist because we are also associated with the Victim Empowerment Room at Menenberg Police Station. All right, and from our side also, we do the applications for protection orders. And if it comes that one person comes on behalf of the other, as Andrea has explained there, and especially if it's a minor child, we need permission in writing why it is actually that this person, or even in a senior person's case, which is disabled, why this person comes on behalf of the person. In most cases, the court actually also allows persons without permission to apply on behalf of another. And then that person that's doing the application can go in as a witness also because that person has witnessed the domestic violence suffered by the victim. So from our side, yes, friends, neighbors and whatever, they can actually report those stuff to our office. And because we are associated with a police officer that does domestic crime. There's quite a nice service from our side that we can provide. We also have a family counselor that does offer counseling within our office where people actually, if they agree to having counseling.
How can people access your services, and what kind of ongoing support do you provide, for the victims? How there are any costs involved, and what should someone expect when they reach out for help? Maybe a listener who is experiencing violence need help.
Sure. So I'm a junior associate at the Women's Legal Center. And the Women's Legal Center does have a legal advice unit and a legal advice office that you can visit in Cape Town, St. George's Mall. Alternatively, you can call the office and one of our paralegals will then contact you and do an initial consultation and see how we can assist, whether that is with legal advice or referrals. Women's Legal Center is a African feminist organization and strategic litigation organization. And so we take on matters that affect a group of people or a class of people, but we also do provide legal advice to complainants and women who seek our advice in terms of violence, whether that is domestic violence, whether it is sexual offenses. And we do also give advice pertaining to all issues related and legal issues related to women's rights. There is no cost involved. So we do provide free legal advice through our unit, and we also take walk-in clients. So you can contact the Women's Legal Center at 021-424-5660. We are based at 5 St. George's Mall in Cape Town, and we are also available on all social media platforms at the Women's Legal Center. Our website is www.wlce.co.za. That is how you can access our services.
Thank you. I'd actually like to extend this question to all of the people joining us today. So, Masi, how can people access your services? What support do you provide? And are there any costs involved?
Sure. So, probono.org is South Africa's only legal clearinghouse. And the meaning of that is that we consult with clients for free. And then once we find the client has a strong matter, we look for a private lawyer who's to do pro bono hours to take on your matter. So that means that your matter will be dealt with for free. Now, we do assist with protection orders, but that's not the only kind of matter that we deal with. So if you're struggling with an issue pertaining to family law, so let's say divorce or let's say maintenance, that's something you can assist with as well. Housing issues, wills, deceased estates, labor matters. So basically, most fields of law is something that we can assist with besides criminal law. And if you want to get in touch with us, I can give you our contact details. So our number is 087-470-0721. And our email address is infocpt@probono.org.za. And we'll be able to direct you into how we can provide you with further legal support.
Thank you, Masi. How about you, Chelsea?
Hi, everyone. So for MOSAIC, actually the full name of MOSAIC is MOSAIC Training Service and Healing Center, and we are community-based with being headquartered in Wynberg, but we do have various offices in Mitchells Plain, specifically in Tafelsig. We have an office in Philippi, Paul, Worcester, and we don't charge any fee to our services, but it's completely free for the survivors. And we specifically focus on support and healing for survivors of domestic or intimate partner violence by providing them with further support through, of course, counseling and further through support groups. We also do assist with shelter services in out-of-region areas. We also do assist with emergency shelter referrals, court support and legal assistance, as well as economic empowerment through giving training, which I think is also quite special. We also do prevention and education through gender-based violence awareness workshops throughout community schools and various community mobilization events. I think it's quite easy to reach us through the internet. By actually just searching on the internet, you'll find all of our various information. But the offices that we do have based in the various communities are walk-in centers. So for survivors, they can actually walk into the center and they'll be assisted by our lovely staff who are able to meet them and of course, provide them with the necessary support that they need. The contact number that could actually be contacted, which is the head office, is 021-761-7585.
Thank you so much. And lastly, I want to ask the Hedeveld Advice Office, how can people access your services? What services do you provide? And what are the costs involved, if any?
Our services is in line with pro bonos, as Marcy now has explained there, with the addition of offering counseling, and everything is free of charge. There's no consultation fee, no legal fees and whatever. Then we also do referrals if pro bono lawyer is requested by the client. So our office can be contacted on 062-067-2074. Our email address is heideveldadviceoffice@gmail.com. And then we have our walk-in center is from Mondays till Thursdays, 8 o'clock until 1:30. And then on a Saturday, we are also here to assist the working group from 8:30 until 12:30.
Thank you very much.
Everyone can give their last words to the listeners, maybe a word of encouragement for the listeners who maybe are in this violent situation.
From a legal perspective, the law is there to protect you. There are mechanisms to access. However, I think that it's important that if you or any family member is struggling with domestic violence, that you continue to support them. It's not an easy process. And so if you need any advice, the Women's Legal Center is there to assist.
How about the advice office? Any last words?
Yeah, I just want to say that people must come forward because the silence must actually be stopped. And that is the slogan that is being used everywhere. We are here to assist because at the end of the day, our children is the biggest sufferers of domestic violence. So in order for them also to be protected, come out, report the stuff, and we can assist with any legal assistance needed.
Masi, do you have any last words?
I think it's important to recognize that although we can provide advice about protection orders on a platform like this, I'm sure many of the listeners may have protection orders or are aware of people who do have protection orders but still do not feel protected and still do not feel safe in their homes or wherever the abuse is taking place. So this is why we have institutions like Pro Bono or MOSAIC, Women's Legal Center, community advice officers, because you don't have to struggle through these things alone. And even though you might feel that you might not get the support that you need from, let's say, the police, you do deserve the protection and you do deserve to enforce your rights. So I think it's important to not give up. I'm sure it's not easy, but it is something that you deserve, not to give up on yourself.
Thank you so much. And Chelsea?
I think to add what everyone has added, just for those who are listening or are facing abuse or violence, that you just remember that you're not alone. I think just as Marcy shared, it's not easy, but I hope that through what we all shared today, that you know that there is help and there is hope available. And actually by us speaking out and reporting the abuse that you are facing or others around you are facing, you're not only protecting yourself, but of course others who might be at risk. So yeah, to those who are listening, you are strong and your feelings do matter, and it is okay to ask for support, and you do deserve safety.
Thank you again, Chelsea. And I think that words conclude our advice office for today. Thank you for all of you for the advices, and yeah, see you soon. I want just to thank the guests from the Women's Legal Center, MOSAIC, local advice offices, and probono.org for sharing their expertise and insights today. Their work in supporting victims of domestic violence and advocating for stronger legal protections is invaluable to our communities. And to our listeners, remember that domestic violence is never acceptable and help is available. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out to this organization or contact the National GVB Command Center on 0800 428 428. Key takeaway from today domestic violence, including physical, emotional, psychological, economic, and sexual abuse. You know, an early intervention and support can save lives. And bystanders can have an important role to play in supporting victims. Also, free legal and support services are available. So remember, breaking the silence around domestic violence is the first step towards ending it. If you found that discussion helpful, please share it with others who might benefit from the information. And for more resources and support, visit the websites of our guests, organization, or contact your local advice office. Thank you for listening, and thank you for caring about these critical issues affecting our communities.